Good afternoon, I'm Charles Macfarlane, Chief Business Officer for Codeplay Software. Today I'll talk about oneAPI with SYCL and how that gives you software portability across multiple processors and accelerators, and that includes especially Nvidia. So first of all, Codeplay Software was acquired last year by Intel. We are being retained as a wholly owned subsidiary. But we still operate as Codeplay Software, and so I am here representing Codeplay Software. So first thing, as I mentioned in the title, Nvidia is ubiquitous out there. They are very dominant with their GPUs as accelerators for accelerating artificial intelligence and high performance compute. Cuda is their programming environment, their whole ecosystem. And it's very proprietary. It's defined by Nvidia for Nvidia GPUs. It is absolutely tied to Nvidia hardware, their GPUs. Developers often have no input as to the direction of Cuda, so it's very much owned by Nvidia and especially legally protected by Nvidia. So Nvidia is very much there as where most artificial intelligence is created and deployed. And there are many other processors, accelerators out there which need a programming environment. So I'm here to talk about an alternative to Cuda and their ecosystem, and that's called SYCL, which is a Khronos open standard, and oneAPI being the bigger ecosystem framework around that. So SYCL, first of all, SYCL is an open cross-platform standard based on C++ and developed by the Khronos Group. Khronos Group are responsible in the software environment for defining and standardizing many software environments. SYCL supports multiple target hardware, including GPUs, CPUs, and FPGAs for all major vendors. And that includes, and why we're here today, RISC-V. With RISC-V, there's a vector extension which you would use as an accelerator for your heterogeneous processing environment. And SYCL is supported by multiple compilers, so you're not locked into one compiler environment. So it truly is open standard. So SYCL, single source, high level standard programming. And as you can see along the bottom there, it supports multiple hardwares from the CPU, especially GPU, other accelerators, FPGAs and DSPs. RISC-V, of course, fits in there. And it's not just us that are putting this out there and creating an implementation of SYCL. You can see over the left-hand side there, you've got Intel. I've got their oneAPI, DPC++ SYCL implementation. And we've made that work down onto multiple hardwares, especially Intel's GPU, but also AMD and Nvidia GPUs. And that's what I'm demonstrating here on the stand today. Codeplay, before we were acquired, and we still have our own SYCL implementation called Compute CPP, and we make that work onto multiple hardware environments. AMD, there's a HIPSYCL version that runs straight down onto AMD as well. And there are multiple other ones from other vendor hardware companies out there. So, oneAPI and SYCL. As I said, oneAPI is a fuller ecosystem. SYCL is the programming environment within it. SYCL sits at the heart of oneAPI. Compare that to Cuda as a programming language within Nvidia. The oneAPI open source, the DPC++, that is their implementation of SYCL, the SYCL compiler, and they open sourced that and made it available, and it's on the LLVM compiler infrastructure. So that's oneAPI and how SYCL fits into it. And again, we're here with RISC-V. It also works onto the RISC-V vector, and you can see if you have a multi-RISC-V processor environment that you want to accelerate in a vector way, in a compute way, then you would use SYCL, or you would use SYCL to offload that to your accelerator, your RISC-V accelerator using RVV. And you can see down the bottom we've done that with NSI Texi, KMC, and the Japanese government sponsored that, NEDO. Now this technology scales very much from the top end supercomputer environment right down to, and we talk about, it can be down to automotive, it can be down to CCTV, consumer devices. And so even at the supercomputer level, here you see 4 supercomputers in America. You've got at Oak Ridge National Labs, they've got Frontier, which is an AMD accelerated supercomputer. You've got Argonne, which is Nvidia. Perlmutter is Nvidia. And then there will be Argonne will have their Aurora supercomputer. And that will be powered by Intel GPUs. And you want a single program environment. When scientists come up with their algorithms and their frameworks, they want that to be able to work on multiple supercomputers, multiple platforms. And so that is very much portable across hardware platforms. But the problem is most people are starting from a different environment. So since I said Nvidia with Cuda, most people are starting this with a Cuda starting point. So they need to take their software from Cuda across to this other oneAPI SYCL environment. And this is what you see here. Where we are today, too many programming platforms supported. And you have Nvidia with the Cuda, AMD with HIP. You've got, on the right-hand side there, you've got proprietary environments. And then SYCL, and we can support SYCL down onto Nvidia, AMD, RISC-V, etc. Where it needs to go going forward is you need to migrate that code across to oneAPI and SYCL. And then that will run across onto all these different platforms, multi-platform supported. So how do you do that migration part in the middle? Well, there's a tool that's part of oneAPI called Scalability, or another name for it. The Scalability is the open source version of it. You might sometimes see it called DPCT, compatibility tool. And that takes your source code in Cuda, migrates it across, and you will get roughly 90% or more of that conversion happening. Because Cuda is full of a lot of proprietary extensions for their hardware, it's not always possible, and depending on your algorithm, it's not always possible to do a migration of that 100%. So it does the migration, achieves 90%, and it then tells you where the problem parts are that you need to focus on to help the tool along. So that's the conversion part of it. It can be semi-automatic, and as I say, with this tool, or moved across into incremental porting. Incremental porting means that you can convert only a part of your Cuda code, convert it to SYCL, and then run that back onto Nvidia GPU, while having the rest of your code retained in Cuda, so that you're moving piece at a time across into the SYCL environment, and it's an incremental approach to doing that development. So you don't need to switch everything from Cuda across to SYCL overnight and push the start button. You can do it piece at a time and still continue your development. Semi-automatic, I mentioned DPCT is the Intel tool, and then Scalability is their open source alternative to it. As I said, roughly 90% of that is migrated across. So there are a lot of tools there to support you moving from this Cuda environment across onto a SYCL environment, which will of course run down onto your RISC-V vector accelerator. Incremental porting, I explained you can do it piece at a time of that code, and you can do it just algorithm at a time, and it's a good way, first of all, to evaluate your code, so that if you've got a piece of code you want to see how that will operate into an RVV environment, a RISC-V environment, you can compare RISC-V with AMD, Nvidia, and Intel, etc. So it is a good way of evaluation, and then when you go for the product, you can do it algorithm at a time, very incremental. So I'm with Codeplay. What is our contribution to this? We've made oneAPI run back onto the AMD and onto Nvidia. Because most companies have invested a lot of money into their AMD and Nvidia GPUs as accelerators, they don't want to remove them and put in a new hardware. So you move the software piece at a time, and you can make that run back into your Nvidia and AMD environment. So again, it's incremental. You can start doing pieces of software at a time, get the software working all in oneAPI environment, and that will all run back into your existing investments, your existing hardware assets that you have. And then you can start transitioning your hardware across as well. So oneAPI for Nvidia GPUs and AMD GPUs. This is what Codeplay does. We open source this, and then we will support your company or developer seats, and we will do that with these companies. And it's already available. So there's the website at the bottom. Just go on developer.codeplay.com and download these plugins for oneAPI onto Nvidia and AMD GPUs. People worry about the tools because since they've done a lot of work with AMD and Nvidia, you can still use all your existing and familiar debugging tools for profiling and debugging. So you can still continue to use your Nvidia GPU tools that are freely available through Nvidia. So we're not telling you to dump all your existing tooling and learn something new. Continue on with your existing tools. How to get the plugins, free download, start using them. They're open source and available through developer.codeplay.com. So we've covered the porting of the code. Now let's talk about the performance. That is always right up there as one of the headline requirements. And you can see here there's some comparison done of moving from Cuda across to SYCL and running that back onto Nvidia. So what was the original one on Nvidia? What was the SYCL version? And you can see for quite a lot of these algorithms that performance is pretty much equivalent. Sometimes it's better, sometimes it's worse, but generally it's equivalent. And that's the performance is achieved as part of it through automated optimization, or as well as handcrafting some of your algorithms. Similar story from AMD with their HIP, which is their CUDA equivalent, their equivalent programming environment, across onto SYCL. Again, running onto the same hardware, and again you can see performance is equivalent, sometimes better, sometimes worse, depending on your algorithm. There's lots of research out there. There's a lot of companies out there evaluating what this move through oneAPI, the performance. There's a lot of papers out there. Click the links and start reading up. It's not just us that's saying this. There's a lot of research out there saying the same thing. What I'm showing over here in the stand is, this started off, this is N-Body, which is a particle simulator and how particles can interact with each other. Think about in the stars, in the galaxy, how different stars and planets interact with each other. And it can go all the way down to almost any particle simulation. So that started its life in Cuda, and we took that Cuda code and ported it across using that cyclomatic, moved it across into SYCL and ran it back onto Nvidia. And then once it's in SYCL, we can run it onto AMD. It will also run through the RISC-V vector processor as well, and other FPGAs and other accelerators and GPUs. And that's what we're showing across here. Get out there, even try this example for yourself and see how it works for you. Get familiar with the tools with this example. So, oneAPI, who owns it, where is it, what are we doing with it? oneAPI was developed by Intel, and they did it to create an industry environment of open source and tools for the industry, the wider industry. So, they created that, they've open sourced a lot of it and making it available to most people. So we recognize that and say, okay, we'll take oneAPI and we'll make sure and we'll support that into Nvidia and AMD GPUs. It's freely and openly available, but if you want a full commercial product support at site level or individuals, then there is a support program as well available there. We support that today for Nvidia GPUs. We will support it later this year for AMD GPUs when we support these plugins. The oneAPI community forum, we're bringing people together, so it's not an Intel thing. We are really out there to define standards across and then base it on SYCL, and we will foster, Codeplay is fostering this and bringing people together to get these open source implementations out there. So, cross-industry group of people, oneAPI, we define these standard interfaces around an open standard, SYCL. We get many people involved in these working groups, these technology groups, and it really is looking to the future. The world is not just CUDA on Nvidia. The world has to evolve so that the standard is there available for everybody on multiple platforms. The benefits for the software guys, Clearly, open standards benefit software guys. Everyone wants an open standard. For the hardware guys, they're creating processors and they want to have a clear API interface that they are developing software to, so that the application developers have a standard platform that they can develop on top of. So we welcome people to come in, join us in this foundation. We are going to create a foundation out of this, and we want people to come in and join the foundation. That will happen later this year, and there will be further announcements later this year about the foundation, the progress of that, and the companies getting involved. And you can come into this and start voting, steering the direction, and making oneAPI something that you would like for the future. oneAPI has been around for quite some time. SYCL's been around for a long time. And you can see there's a lot of companies already using SYCL and oneAPI to some level. So this is not just the start of something. This has been around for quite a few years. There's already a momentum around embracing and moving forward with SYCL. So that's it. Nvidia and Cuda, with Cuda, are dominant and the starting point for most AI development, but it locks you in. Nobody wants lock-in. Everyone wants the freedom to go and experiment and use and develop using alternatives. SYCL is the best alternative and provides that platform of independence for heterogeneous compute as well. So you've got CPU, GPU, accelerator, FPGA. So there's heterogeneous compute out there. SYCL is the best alternative. oneAPI will give you that fuller ecosystem around that. Start now. You can get in there and start using the tools that are freely available. Just go on developer.codeplay.com. Start experiment with it. Join the oneAPI community forum tomorrow so that you too can contribute to where this is going. Quick word of Codeplay. We've been around since 2002. We've been around 20 years and seen the whole evolution of OpenCL and SYCL as standards, and worked with, as you can see up the top right there, many big companies. There's many companies in there I cannot mention who our customers have been. We really do support oneAPI now with SYCL at the heart of it, and it addresses almost every market segment. Since I pointed out at the start, we are now owned by Intel. There's a legal disclaimer at the very end there. Thank you for that. Any questions?